All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc on a Wednesday. John, Chris, and Adam hanging out talking about the NBA draft. All right, we talked about the first two picks. I think we all agree that where it's going to get interesting tonight is around the Houston Rockets' third pick and down, right? Because we saw last night Houston Rockets make a trade with the Brooklyn Nets. They signaled that, hey, they could be very interested in acquiring somebody of Kevin Durant's caliber. And if not, Adam, you've heard, as we all have, that there are other teams behind them that might be willing to move up. Chief among them, I think, probably the Memphis Grizzlies, who are desperate for a center to pair alongside Jaren Jackson Jr. They had a ton of injuries last year. That could be a team potentially that might be on the move. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you have Memphis, who's really targeting Donovan Clingan. Really wants to try and get that done. And I think they are talking with as many as three different teams in that top seven, because they're, if Clingan is still on the board, that Portland at 7 is the floor. He will not get past that. So I think they're engaged with Houston at 3. I think they're engaged with Detroit at 5. I think, and in fact, that speculation I think has really increased in the last 24 hours. If they believe that Houston will take Reed Shepherd at 3 and that Atlanta will take Risa Shea at 1, thus allowing Clingan to slip all the way to 5, there could be a trade market there. There could also be a trade market at 6 with Charlotte. So I think that there are multiple teams, but tops among them are Memphis, who are engaged in discussions with as many as 3 teams in the top 6 or 7 picks, and Donovan Clingan is the top prize. He, to me, is the biggest variable in this draft, because there's a chance he goes number 1. If this is Quinn Snyder's pick, I think Atlanta does end up with him. He reminds him of Rudy Gobert, who he starred with in Utah. And Quinn Snyder, we all know, has a very intricate playbook. Well, who better to run center for that team than a guy who played for Danny Hurley in high school, a guy who's 7'2" and can throw slip passes off the dribble. So he checks a couple different boxes for Quinn Snyder. But again, there is a significant trade market, and Memphis is being very aggressive. Remember, they moved Steven Adams. They've got Jaren Jackson coming back this year. They've got Ja Morant coming back this year. And a Donovan Clingan, Jaren Jackson front court tandem could be potentially elite on the defensive end of the floor.
Yeah, that was a lost season for the Grizzlies last year, and they're going to be one of 12, 13 teams in the Western Conference that are going to have designs, Chris, on making it into the postseason this year. It's going to be an absolute gauntlet in the Western Conference. But I'm curious what you think about the shape that the Houston Rockets are in, because 41-41 last year pushed the Golden State Warriors down to the wire for that final play-in spot in the Western Conference. They already have a ton of really good players in Alperen Şengün. Jalen Green had a good second half of the season. They went and got Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks, and Amen Thompson they might have hit on. He looks like he could be something, because when Alperen Şengün went down, they ended up playing some small ball 5 with him. Jabari Smith Jr., he's another guy that they like. Where do you think they are moving? I mean, it seems like they're really positioning themselves to try to grab a star and win now with Ime Udoka in his second year.
Listen, I've talked to S. Fink. You know, we got a lot of behind the scene conversations with a lot of different scouts and at these events that we go to, and connected to a lot of people. And you're absolutely right. They're trying to win right now, in my opinion. A lot of people just assume, because mock drafts have Reed Shepherd going 3rd. And I've always been cautioned by some of these guys, do not look at the mock drafts. There's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes. Chief among them is that Kevin Durant, or necessarily the Phoenix situation, where, and I mentioned this to one of the guys when I was talking about the Rockets, said the Rockets have a lot of pieces, but they don't have a centerpiece. That's what they don't have. And Ime Udoka, I think, is a centerpiece coach, but they don't have a centerpiece player enough to get them to 41-41 and challenge for the play-in and get in the playoffs, but not enough to push the OKC, to push the Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards, and obviously the Nuggets with Jokic. So I think that they are positioning themselves in a really strategic way. Presently constructed, Fink may disagree, they can still be competitive, right? They have enough pieces to be competitive. Yeah. The question is, are they willing to make the move? And I think what they did, the moves last night, proves that they're trying to find a way. Now, I don't think Phoenix is going to part with Kevin Durant. I think they're going to run it back with Budenholzer bringing him in. But at the same time, anything is possible tonight.
Yeah, don't necessarily have to do it tonight, but it is definitely a team to watch. And you mentioned that they don't have a centerpiece. Another team that does have a centerpiece, Adam, right behind them that I think is an intriguing team for tonight is the San Antonio Spurs. Obviously, they have Wemby. They've got picks 4 and 8 tonight, and they've got Devin Vassell. And then after that, like how you feel about guys like Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones and Jeremy Sohan, that may vary, but they got 2 guys that they really like and then 2 picks here. What are you anticipating from them? And could they be a team that might want to move up?
Yeah, I think they certainly could. To me, they need shooting more than anything else. There's a lot of Stephon Castle buzz. I don't like
Mhm.
that fit as much as others because I think the most glaring thing they lacked around Wemby this year was floor spacing. Stephon Castle, not a great shooter of the basketball. He would only further complicate that variable. So I look at guys like Risa Shea. That could be an example of why they might want to move up. I look at guys like Dalton Connect, Reed Shepherd, ones who we know can really stretch the floor, who may not be stars. That's the thing about this draft. You have to forget about what the normal return is of the number 1 pick or the number 4 pick. And you just have to look at it for what the options are that are available to you right now. And right now, there are no obvious stars on this board. Somebody will evolve out of nowhere. There'll be some surprise. There always is. But right now, we have no idea who that will be. So forget about the return of whether it's 4 or 1 or 8 and just say, who are the guys that are best suited to complement Wemby? I think that's Risa Shea. I think that's Connect. I think that's Shepherd. That's guys who know how to play, who can shoot the ball and create spacing. And you know what? If they aren't great defenders, guess what? You got Wemby behind you, and that is just the ultimate insurance policy. So I expect them to target shooters, but there's also a line of thinking that says they could go after guys like Castle, Tajon Salon, other players like that. It's going to be really interesting to see what direction they go in. I've even heard that maybe Donovan Clingan might be an option at 4 and try and do the Minnesota Timberwolves Twin Tower thing. Obviously, that's been a thing in San Antonio in the past.
Chris, which way are you going? I mean, San Antonio needs a ton. Would you package those 2 picks and move up for one guy, or just take the best 2 available at 4 and 8?
It's funny. I tend to not agree with Fink on everything, but I'm going to agree with him there. I think if you have Wembanyama, you have to put shooting around him. And I was a Stephon Castle fan. I thought he fit nicely with UConn. Obviously with Cam Spencer and Trisha Newton be the stars, and he just had to do his part as a young guy fitting in. But put him in a position where you actually are trying to advance the organization forward with a star like Wemby. I agree. I mean, I love Dalton Connect as a player like that. And it's hard. Again, I can mention a Keyshawn George, who's a long athletic player that can shoot. You mentioned Risa Shea. I even like guys like Terrence Shannon. I just think that, and I think they kind of have players like him, like you mentioned, Devin Vassell and Keldon. But at the end of the day, there are some really good pieces, not great pieces in San Antonio in this draft. I think Dalton Connect would be a great Reed Shepherd. Those guys would be really good fits with the way they play. And to be honest with you, that was what San Antonio was. You had a great player in Duncan, a great player in David Robinson, and you had some really good players. I'm not going to talk about your player that you love. What's his name? The little guard, Tony Parker. But I'm just saying, like, they had some really good players around them that really made the again, I'm one of those guys about lineup optimization. Get pieces that fit. I think Pop's one of the best ever. They just have to find a way. They got athletes. They just don't have enough around Wemby. And as great as Wemby is, he cannot do it by himself. He needs some other players around him. And I think they have a chance at 4 and 8 in this draft to grab a couple of shooters, Fink. I mean, to grab a couple of guys that's what they're known for. Be intentional in that regard and really help Wemby. As far as the last thing I'll say about the Clingan thing, that would be phenomenal. It will be great to watch, but will it lend itself to winning? I don't know.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Wemby can't do it by himself. One other guy who can't do it by himself, despite how great he is LeBron James. In terms of intrigue for tonight, later on in the draft, after the lottery, the Los Angeles Lakers have the 17th pick tonight. They just hired JJ Redick as their head coach. LeBron James has a looming decision this week on whether or not to pick up his option for $51.4 million. D'Angelo Russell has an option that he has to decide. A lot going on with the Lakers. Adam, if they do end up keeping that pick, who might work for them? Because they need shooters. Everybody needs shooters, but they need shooters too.
Yeah, let's just state the obvious here. They're not going to take Bronny at 17, or at least I would be. I'll get up and walk off the set if they take Bronny at 17. I'll just mail in the last 13 picks tonight. I think someone like Tristan da Silva, a plug and play guy, because as long as you've got LeBron, you're in win now mode to the extent that you're capable of. So someone who can come in and provide immediate minutes. Tristan da Silva is someone who is a really good in offensive structure because he's a reliable decision maker. He can make a spot up shot. He's a good cutter. He can hold his own on the defensive end of the floor. I could also see them looking for someone like the next iteration of their big man, someone like Yves Missy, who is more of a long-term guy because he's one and done, but has that athleticism as a Derek Lively type. He can rim run. He can protect the rim. He can be a lob threat. Baylor Shireman's another, maybe too high for him, but Baylor Shireman's another one in that plug and play option. I don't think if you're the Lakers, they can afford to take a flyer on someone who is a high risk, high reward prospect. So I think, just to be clear, I think they'll take Bronny tomorrow night at 55, maybe even move up to get him earlier in the second round to avoid any drama with LeBron's free agency. But tonight, I think it's about either an athlete on the front line or a plug and play wing.
Yeah, obviously, Tristan da Silva, a really good player. And the question is, LeBron, obviously, he's going to opt in. I mean, I'm one of those guys that believe they should trade LeBron and get some assets for him. And LeBron, find yourself an opportunity to win a championship. That clearly is not going to happen. People don't like that take. But I'll say this, and I like Zach Edey if the Lakers are going to keep the pick. I just believe for the Lakers, right? They've not finished higher than 7th in years. What is going to be the defining way that you can make a push? Jared Vanderbilt, Rui, you can name all the guys they brought in. Gabe Vincent. It hasn't worked. And I like Tristan da Silva, but to me, does that guy move the needle with a ball-dominant LeBron and Anthony Davis, who are the centerpiece of? You have to find someone, to move Anthony possibly from the 5 spot, bring someone in. Again, you could talk about, he can't play defense, he's slow, he's this, he's that. He's a weapon. The Lakers need another weapon. Tristan da Silva or players of the like, to me, does not move the needle. In this draft, if you got a chance to get a guy who's 7'5", 2-time player of the year, can score at a high level, make free throws, offensive rebound, with LeBron, I think you take a chance on him there, period. That's what I believe.
Rob Pelinka has his work cut out for him this offseason. We're going to take one more quick break, and then on the other side, we're going to discuss the guy that Adam said he'd walk off the show if Bronny got taken tonight. He's not going to get taken tonight, but we'll at least discuss him on the other side. This is Beyond the Arc on CBS Sports Network.